CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie O.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. A deal is done. The EU and the UK have reached an agreement on post-Brexit trade arrangements for Northern Ireland.
Our other headlines: fears that the death toll in the migrant boat sinking off Italy could now reach 100 people, with 62 migrants known to have died, including 12 children.
An early breakthrough in the election for Nigeria's next president, with results rolling in, but it could be a few days before it's finally decided.
A glimpse into the 5G future. What's billed as the biggest connectivity event kicks off in Spain as the industry faces questions over who should pay for the infrastructure.
And it's one of the world's biggest farming events. We're in Paris, where meat exports to China are top of the menu.
The European Union and the United Kingdom have agreed a new deal over post-Brexit trade arrangements for Northern Ireland.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the breakthrough at a press conference in Windsor. As expected, the deal will bring in green and red lanes for goods into Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK.
Prime Minister Sunak says the agreement marks a new chapter in the UK's relationship with the EU. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Michael Voss, watching events for us in Westminster. Michael, really, is this deal done then?
Well, Jamie, at the level that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, have put their signatures to a new deal at Windsor Castle earlier today. Now comes the hard sell. It's a gamble for the Prime Minister. If all the parties agree to it, it goes through, then it marks an historic breakthrough in relations between the UK and the EU. If there's serious opposition to this, then it could cost him his premiership and lead to yet another political crisis here in the UK. Now, a little while ago, both Sunak and von der Leyen gave a joint press conference at Windsor Castle. Let's hear to what the Prime Minister had to say.
I'm pleased to report that we have now made a decisive breakthrough. Together, we have changed the original protocol and are today announcing the new Windsor framework. Today's agreement delivers smooth-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom, protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland.
We don't have the full text yet, but it is clear that the European Union has made major concessions to Britain on this. Now, in a couple of hours' time, the Prime Minister will come here to Parliament and give a speech there and present the findings to Parliament, and then we'll see what the reaction is.
Yeah, then we'll see, Michael. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has managed seemingly to iron out some kind of an agreement. Is it going to please all parts of the Conservative Party and all parts of the Democratic Unionist Party?
Well, I think the really big question is, how will the Democratic Union Party react to that? So far, they're saying they're neither positive nor negative. They're going to have lawyers go through the full text with a fine-tooth comb, and then they'll come out and say, as you say, they're not sitting in the devolved parliament in Northern Ireland. They're refusing to take part. It would be a major victory for Rishi Sunak if he can get the DUP, one, to accept the deal he's done and return to the Northern Ireland Assembly. If, on the other hand, they come out in opposition to this, then I think the hardline Brexiteers in Rishi Sunak's own party will probably vote against it as well. We still don't know if it's going to be put to a vote to Parliament. Technically, it doesn't have to be, but in terms of legitimacy, it probably does. So it will be interesting to see just how large an opposition he faces within his own party. The opposition Labour Party says it will vote for the New Deal. Jamie?
Michael, thank you for that. Our correspondent Michael Voss in Westminster.
In other news, the Australian firm Recharge Industries has bought the collapsed UK electric car battery startup British Volt. Recharge was selected earlier this month as the preferred bidder. No details of figures have been released yet. British Volt collapsed in January after failing to raise funds for its proposed $4.5 billion factory in northeast England.
Hundreds of flights have been cancelled as strikes hit 2 regional airports in Germany. Public service and aviation security staff at Düsseldorf and Cologne-Bonn airports walked out over pay. The 24-hour strike is organised by the Verdi Union, who planned a massive strike in 7 major German airports earlier this month.
Billionaire technology dealmaker Bao Fan is cooperating with Chinese authorities conducting an investigation, that's according to his bank. Bao is the founder of China Renaissance Holdings. His company is behind several major mergers in China's online business industry. Bao was reported missing 11 days ago when his company claimed to have lost contact with him.
The Chinese electronics company Xiaomi has launched 2 new premium smartphone models on the overseas market. The Xiaomi 13 and 13 Pro, which were first launched in China in December, will sell for more than $1,000 and aim to take on Apple and Samsung at the top end of the market. Xiaomi is the 3rd most popular brand of mobile phone in China, behind Huawei and Apple, but is seeking to expand internationally.
Well, talking of phones, who should fund Europe's new digital infrastructure? That question looks set to dominate the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona as pressure grows on the tech giants to bear more of the cost. It's the first day of the conference, billed as the biggest connectivity event in the world. Let's talk now to our correspondent, Ken Brown, who's there. So, Ken, I understand Spanish royalty has been attending the opening of the Congress. What did Spain's King Felipe have to say?
Yes, we saw the King of Spain have a walkthrough today. Yesterday, the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez was speaking live on television. This is a huge event, one of the biggest technology events on the planet. We've seen some absolutely incredible things today. Vertical takeoff drones. We've seen a robot dog that can smell a gas leak, report that back to base, and then return itself to charge itself. So there are some incredible gadgets, some just unbelievable things that we're seeing for the future. A lot of the talk is about connectivity here, about 5G, and about how those changes and advances are going to underpin the great digital transformation that we've been hearing so much about. Also, we heard a lot about sustainability here, and that is one of the things we'll be talking about in our reports today. Let's have a look right now. It's billed as the biggest connectivity event in the world. Some of the best-known brands bring their cutting-edge tech, and top keynote speakers give insight on new disruptors in an industry in constant evolution. The newly extended 4-day event will host debates on development of artificial intelligence, a glimpse at 6G, and how to achieve green targets in an industry that has been criticized for its heavy environmental impact.
Of course, we can always improve, and that's what we're aiming to do. Companies are focusing more and more on having sustainability as part of their DNA. We simply can't move forward if we forget about sustainability.
The annual expo is often a chance for the biggest players in the market to show off their new products and assess how their rivals are doing in this extremely competitive industry. Chinese telecoms giant ZTE released some new devices like the Nubia brand's first AR smart glasses and the world's first AI-powered 3D tablet that works without the 3D glasses.
Because we know, in the past few years, many 3D products come to the market, but they not succeed because they only use a screen, 3D screen. But without the software and other things, I think the experience is a disaster. But along the Nubia 3D pad, I think it solved this problem.
In a crowded device market, ZTE is trying to differentiate itself by aiming to become a one-stop shop for network, smartphone, big data, and even energy storage solutions. But with giants like Apple, Samsung, and Huawei dominating the mobile market, breaking into the device scene won't be easy. On day one at the Mobile World Congress, integration and connection have been two of the key words as companies try to unleash the power of 5G. Yes, and of course, as we mentioned, 5G, such an important topic here. People are already talking about 6G. And as I mentioned earlier, those are both going to underpin the great digital transformation. Automated factories, driverless automated taxis that are going to take us flying home. There are so many changes coming down the line, but all of those are based on that connectivity that is going to bring the world together in terms of technology. Now, we're going to be here at the Mobile Congress all week, so stick with us to find out all the latest tech.
We will indeed, Ken. Thank you. We will talk to you tomorrow. Ken Brown there at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, it's Africa's largest economy. They're still counting the votes in Nigeria, and there's an early breakthrough in what's thought to be a close contest.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. A quick reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
European markets have had a positive start on Monday. They're up 1.3%. Last week, they posted their steepest decline of the year so far. That followed hotter than expected US inflation data, which sparked concern about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates further. Well, let's talk now to Fiona Sincotta, an analyst at City Index. Fiona, good to see you. Welcome. So Eurozone confidence data out today showing consumers more optimistic this month compared with the previous month. What's your take on this? Why is this? Why could one possibly be optimistic?
Well, that's right. So we've seen optimism improve. Consumer confidence has hit a one-year high in the region. And there are a couple of factors which are combining to sort of help this more optimistic outlook. So, for example, the unemployment rate in the Eurozone is at a record low. It's down at 6.6% in December. So, you know, the labour market is particularly strong. That's helping consumers feel confident. We've also seen that inflation has been cooling recently, and also that the energy situation in the Eurozone and Europe has been improving. So, you know, these factors combined have helped households and consumers feel a bit more optimistic about their outlook for their finances and the economy as a whole. However, it is worth bearing in mind that the figures still are down considerably from the historical average.
And the truth is, optimism figures might excite the forecasters and the analysts. I mean, does it really have any bearing or influence in the real economy?
It can do, yes, because when consumers feel more confident, they tend to spend more. So if they spend more, that tends to be good for the services sector, the retail sector, and it just keeps those cogs of the economy fueling along. So yes, you know, a consumer which is happy to spend is going to be good for the economy. It does also mean, however, that a consumer that is spending could also mean that inflation may take that little bit longer to sort of to come down, especially with the ECB trying to rein in inflation, which is historically at quite high levels right now, and they're working hard to bring that down.
It's a slightly odd set of figures, I mean, conflicting in some ways. If you break it down sector by sector, confidence among both manufacturers and service providers worsened, while it improved a little for retailers and the construction companies. Why so?
Yes, so I mean, you know, I've got to say the data does slightly defy other data points that we've seen with regards to manufacturing and the services, which have come in stronger across this month. So, you know, it goes against that. And I think that really does just highlight that we do have to have a sort of a cautiously optimistic stance towards this data. However, there are some points of good news. So we did see that sort of there was a solid decline in selling pressures or selling pressures on price expectations. And that was good news for the construction industry. But as I said, you know, these results can be volatile. So you do expect to see changes from month to month.
Well, your word is volatile. I mean, that's bang on, really, isn't it? You look at retailers pulling European shares higher today after their worst weekly performance this year. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, you know, we're seeing a very mixed behaviour as far as sort of the markets have been concerned from the start of the year to where they are now. And I mean, you know, the overriding concern here that we're looking at is going to be inflation. We know that last week we saw that the inflation, core inflation, which takes out the more volatile items like food and fuel, actually rose in January, and that was completely unexpected. So, you know, investors are going to really focus on those inflation figures from the Eurozone this week.
Fiona, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. All the best. Fiona Cincotta there from City Index.
There's been an early upset in Nigeria's elections as results come in from Saturday's vote, with the ruling party beaten in one of its traditional strongholds. The Labour Party candidate, Peter Obi, has taken the commercial hub of Lagos. Obi is challenging Nigeria's two established parties in a three-way race that's expected to take days to count. Independent electoral observers have criticised some aspects of the voting. Well, to win the election, the presidential candidate must win the highest number of votes. But this year there's one more threshold. The winning candidate must win at least 25% of the vote in 2/3 of Nigeria's 36 states. So that's at least a quarter of the vote in at least 24 states to confirm victory. Otherwise, there will be a runoff between the two candidates with the most votes to take place within 3 weeks. Our correspondent Deji Banamosi is live in Lagos. Some early results coming in, Deji. What do we think about where this could be heading?
Well, from the early results coming in, these results now that have been announced at the National Collation Center, released by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Not all of them, but the ruling party's candidate is obviously leading. He's leading in the results that have been declared so far. But then it's still very early to tell how this is going to shape out, because we're looking at 36 states. Just around 8 or so states have been released so far. So more states are still to come. Quite early to tell who would eventually take the day. But as we speak at the moment, of course, the ruling party's candidate is leading. And of course, you did talk about the ruling party's candidate now losing in his stronghold of Lagos. That's true. It actually happened. He lost narrowly to the candidate of the Labour Party. But of course, at the national level, where the election results are being collated now, the election results for the entire country, it's actually the ruling party's candidate that is leading. But it's still too early, as I said, because more results are still going to come in.
OK, and has there been any criticism about how this election has been carried out, how voting has been processed?
Of course. I mean, there have been plenty of criticism, especially from the opposition party. And let me just tell you, there was a mild drama not quite long ago at the National Collation Center in Abuja, where the main opposition party, the PDP, and a couple of parties, their agents now at the Collation Center, staged a walkout because they actually wanted the Independent National Electoral Commission to halt the process of the entire process, to stop announcing further results. They cited a breach. They wanted the breach to be resolved before further announcements of the results. But of course, INEC turned down that request, and then they staged a walkout from the National Collation Center. But other than that, observers too have actually criticized the way some of the voting officials, INEC officials now handle the process. Just take a listen to what some of them have been saying.
The professional conduct of polling officials, as well as some ad hoc staff who demonstrated inadequate knowledge of their duties, especially with the voting material. The setup of most of the polling units visited did not adequately protect the secrecy of the voting process.
What the observers actually noted there is quite true. One of the problems is that, polling units here where people are supposed to go vote are not clearly designated, and most times they're in public places, so it's not as if public and open places. And one of the things I also noticed when I covered the election on Saturday is that some of the polling officials, just as the observers said, didn't have a proper handle of the situation, especially with the operation of the BVAS machine. That was a problem in a couple of places. But other than that, the election went on relatively peacefully. And INEC, of course, has said, look, despite the problem with the BVAS in a couple of places, that the election has been a success. But all the same, we just have to wait until the conclusion of the process and then wait to hear what other observers will say to find out how successful this election has been.
OK, well, we'll certainly see. Thank you very much indeed, Deji Banamosi in Lagos. Let's get a bit more analysis on this now, and Michael Famarotti joins us. He's Head of Intelligence at polling and data company Steers. Michael, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here at CGTN today. You're in the business of polling and predictions. When do you think we could get a final result, and who could win?
So if you mean the final INEC results, INEC knows. My guess is probably around, late on Tuesday. In terms of getting a good sense of who wins, I think that picture is building already. Just by looking at the regional trends, I think the APC candidate is so far looking like the clear front runner. The only caveat there is that we're not seeing enough data coming in from the Northwest, which has the most voters. So once we get more clarity there, I think we should be able to essentially extrapolate to the winner, if not the final vote itself.
And this was perhaps an expected narrow win in Lagos. Perhaps, though, we're seeing a bit of a change in generation, generational shift in Nigeria, with 18 to 35-year-olds making up nearly 40% of the electorate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'd actually say that the Labour Party win in Lagos was actually quite unexpected because, Steers put out a model and a prediction that Peter Obi was likely to just upset Tinubu, and that was quite a controversial call at the time. So it is still a bit of a surprise to me that did pan out. And I would say that, yes, it very much is a reflection of the change of the guard, not necessarily just the number of youths on the voter database, but the number of youths that are engaged in the political process. And I cannot imagine that this would have happened had we not seen the NSAS protest in 2020.
Now, the voting process is always a really big challenge in a big democracy like Nigeria. We heard Deji there saying there had been some issues with the technology. Is that playing a bigger role in this election?
Yeah, I would say that generally the sentiment is disappointment in that there was a lot of furor over the passage of the new Electoral Act and the implementation of electronic transmission. We haven't really seen that play out, honestly. There's still been a lot of manual collation, manual transmission, and that has left room for people to contest the final results. And we're still seeing that in Ekiti State especially, which was the first to announce even early yesterday.
So this election comes at a time when the country's facing a cash crunch and petrol scarcity, among other challenges. What impact will this have on voting, and what will President Buhari's successor need to focus on?
Yeah, so in terms of cash crunch and petrol scarcity, I think it's two sides. One is that it has definitely frustrated the electorate and probably convinced them that more drastic change is needed, possibly a third force candidate. At the same time, there are practical constraints because of the cash crunch that may prevent people from voting. So we're going to pay lots of attention to turnout and see how the cash crunch has affected it. In terms of what the new president has to pick up on, it's really the economy and the insecurity. In the last 10 years, we've really seen a lot of decline in Nigeria's living standards and increasing insecurity all around the country. Those are the two things that are top of the president's in tray.
And do you think Nigeria can create a more attractive environment for foreign investment? And how crucial is that to the long-term economy for Nigeria?
100%. I think the first thing is the elections. We need to ensure that by the end of the elections, the international community is sure of two things. One, that the elections were relatively free and fair, and two, that the incoming president is going to unwind some of the more harmful and constraining policies that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, namely the foreign exchange policy, but also something as long-term as the petrol subsidy. So once there is confidence that those are some of the things that the new president has a different stance on, then we're likely going to see more interest in Nigeria, if not investment per se.
OK, Michael, really great to get your thoughts today. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Michael Famarotti there from the polling and data company Steers.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has unveiled his country's new strategy for Africa ahead of a 4-country visit to the continent. Macron, who's due to attend an environmental summit in Gabon before heading to Angola, said he wanted a truly new relationship between Africa and Europe. Tensions have been rising between France and its former African colonies, with French forces ousted from Mali and Burkina Faso last year after 2 military coups.
Now, if you love North African food, then this is for you.
A feast from the region has been on the menu at the Mediterranean Cuisine Festival in Tunis. Our correspondent Adnan Chawachi went along for a taste.
Couscous is a North African dish which is made in all Maghreb countries, especially in Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco. Couscous has recently emerged as a Mediterranean staple food. It's just one of the delicacies that were on offer at the Mediterranean Cuisine Festival.
I'm using fresh semolina to make this handmade couscous with fresh sardines. This is a typical Mediterranean dish. All coastal cities make this dish, but in different ways. It's cheap and very healthy.
Pizza, the popular Neapolitan street food adopted by all Mediterranean countries, is now a universal food. A pizza maker in Italy is called a pizzaiolo. Pizzaiolos here in Tunis are competing to make the best recipe. Italian chefs insist that a tasty pizza starts with a perfect pizza dough. A panel of experts picks the best pizzas in the contest and bases its judgment on the cooking, palatability, topping and taste of the product.
Pizza is made in the whole of the Mediterranean region. The jury is made up of members of an Italian association of chefs. They are not only designating the best pizzolo of the festival, but also training young pizzolos on how to make a perfect dough.
Many popular dishes are made differently in Mediterranean countries and throughout the world. Participants also took part in a contest to make and cook Italian pasta with different Mediterranean flavors and recipes.
I have made an Italian tagliatelle with pesto and burrata. All ingredients were made here. I'm keeping old recipes and adding special Mediterranean spices.
Claire Daoud is a cheese maker from France. She has adapted her French cheese recipes to the Tunisian and Mediterranean tastes.
I'm making my own cheese from the milk produced by my dairy cows at the farm. This festival is an opportunity for visitors to taste dozens of homemade varieties of cheese, amusing traditional French recipes.
The three-day cuisine event based on the theme When Art and Gastronomy Come Together has helped tens of thousands of visitors discover over 1,001 flavors and specialties from the Mediterranean region. The culinary festival also aims to encourage and develop small and medium-sized businesses in the agri-food sector and to promote innovative Mediterranean food projects. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. The United Nations top human rights official denounces what he called massive violations by Russian forces in Ukraine.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen acts.
The difference is in the detail, the background,
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. Our top stories. A deal is done. The EU and the UK reach agreement on post-Brexit trade arrangements for Northern Ireland.
An early breakthrough in the election for Nigeria's next president, with results rolling in, but it could be a few days before it's finally decided.
It's now feared the death toll in the migrant boat shipwreck off Italy could reach 100. 62 people have been confirmed dead after a boat carrying migrants hit the rocks on Sunday.
80 people were found alive, and the Italian Coast Guard is searching for more survivors along nearby beaches. Some 200 people were said to be aboard the ship sailing from Turkey. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called on the international community to provide safe routes for migrants and refugees.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Giles Gibson in Rome. Giles, this is a pretty grim tale, isn't it? What's the latest on the rescue operation?
Well, Jamie, one of the main challenges for the authorities in southern Italy is just establishing how many people were on board that vessel when it crashed into some rocks just off the southern coast of Italy. Initially, in the first few hours after this tragic accident took place, there were estimates of maybe 100 or 150, but that number has now risen to 200. And of course, that really sort of enters into the calculations about how many people could potentially still be missing more than 24 hours after this tragic accident. We're also getting some information about exactly how the authorities responded to this boat approaching the Italian coast. We've been hearing that a plane from Frontex, which is the European Union's border agency, spotted this vessel approaching the Italian coast. Patrol boats were then sent out, but they had to turn back because of the really rough seas that eventually led to that wooden vessel being smashed to pieces against some rocks just off the Italian coast.
And the question, of course, being asked is how you stop such an awful tragedy from happening again.
Well, that's right, and the response from Italian leaders straight after this accident has been to pledge that they're going to crack down on human trafficking groups that bring migrants from northern Africa, and in this case from Turkey, across the Mediterranean to try to get to Italy and then, of course, to the European Union. And the Italian President Sergio Mattarella and the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni have also talked a lot about how they want the EU to do more to help them respond to these trafficking groups. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, did pledge that she was going to redouble efforts within the EU to try to come up with a combined response to this. But we've also had some very interesting comments from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, really saying that it's up to governments to establish safe, orderly, legal routes for migrants and refugees. So basically saying that they need to create those routes for refugees and migrants so that they don't have to take their lives in their own hands to try to reach the shores of Italy or Greece or Spain, and then, of course, try to claim asylum here in the European Union.
Giles, thank you for that. Our correspondent Giles Gibson in Rome.
The United Nations top human rights official has denounced what he called massive violations by Russian forces in Ukraine.
The UN's Human Rights Council is meeting in Geneva with several member countries calling for further investigations into allegations of atrocities. Ukraine wants a special tribunal to prosecute those responsible. The United Nations Secretary-General says respect for human rights has gone into reverse because of the conflict.
The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has documented dozens of cases of conflict-related sexual violence against men, women and girls, and serious violations of international humanitarian and human rights law against prisoners of war, and hundreds of cases of enforced disappearances and arbitrary detention of civilians were also documented.
China has called for the rights of individual nations and developing countries to be taken into account at the Geneva summit.
China has cautioned against a one-size-fits-all approach to human rights and warned against coercion of smaller countries. China's foreign minister told the Assembly that the rights of all countries to independently choose their own path to human rights development should be respected.
Ukraine claims to have shot down 11 out of 14 Iranian drones used in attacks on Sunday.
The capital, Kyiv, was targeted by the devices along with the city of Chernihiv. In the south of the country, power supplies to the port city of Odessa were cut off after 2 energy facilities were hit by Russian missiles.
Meanwhile, Russia's former president has repeated his country's warning that the conflict in Ukraine could turn nuclear. Dmitry Medvedev says the continued supply of arms to Kiev risks a global nuclear catastrophe and an apocalypse for Ukraine's backers.
Opposition leaders from Belarus say a Russian plane has been blown up at an airfield near the capital Minsk. The group says 2 separate explosions disabled the surveillance aircraft in an attack carried out by people it described as partisans. Kyiv has previously accused Moscow of using airstrips in Belarus to launch attacks on Ukraine.
Well, the conflict in Ukraine has hit the country's economy hard, with both unemployment and inflation soaring over the past year. Our correspondent William Denslow reports from Kyiv.
A few years ago, tour groups would be regularly taken around this part of Europe. But with martial law in place, there are no commercial flights, and men under 60 can't leave Ukraine. For one Ukrainian tour guide, trips now focus on discovering his nation's local culture and natural beauty. Alexander Homenkum says the COVID-19 pandemic helped prepare him for being a tour guide during the conflict in Ukraine. But these remain uncharted territories for those in the tourism industry.
One colleague of mine now organizes tours for Ukrainian refugees in Stockholm, and another works in the kitchen. Out of those who stayed in Ukraine, only I continue to work in the tourism business.
Ukraine's economy contracted in 2022 by more than 30%, with inflation rising by over 25%. The National Bank of Ukraine predicts the economy to pick up around 0.3% this year, but headwinds remain.
During the summer, around June, August, the job market started to recover, but this recovery was interrupted by heavy shelling and damage to critical infrastructure, when many enterprises were unable to operate due to lack of electricity. But this has been overcome, and we are seeing a gradual adaptation.
Some analysts estimate that a third of Ukrainians that had a job before the conflict escalated a year ago are currently unemployed, forcing many to come to unemployment centres like this one in Kyiv. According to those here, they have about 6,000 people in their database currently looking for work. The problem is there are only around 4,000 jobs in Kyiv available. Air alerts sounded moments after we met Allah at this unemployment centre. The former puppeteer spoke to us from a nearby shelter.
I worked in a library, and then after the start of the war, some of my colleagues and I were laid off. So I ended up in the employment centre and have been going there for 3 months.
The International Monetary Fund says the country could land sizable financial support going forward. Those here are counting on that economic recovery translating to better luck in their search for work. Liam Denslow, CGTN, Kyiv.
One person has died and 69 others have been injured in another earthquake in Turkey. The quake, with a magnitude of 5.6, hit the city of Malatya on Monday, bringing down dozens of buildings. It's the latest tremor to hit the region since 2 earthquakes left over 50,000 dead across Turkey and Syria. President Erdogan has apologized for the slow response of his government to the initial disaster, blaming bad weather and infrastructure damage.
Police in Northern Ireland are investigating an unverified claim by dissident Republican group the New IRA that it shot a senior police officer last week. At least 10 shots were fired at Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell, who is in a critical but stable condition. The New IRA claims responsibility in a typed statement that appeared on a wall in Derry on Sunday. 6 people remain in police custody.
More countries are relaxing their travel restrictions on passengers from China from the 1st of March. Japan will no longer force all travellers from China to take a COVID test on arrival, although they will still need to show a negative test result before boarding their flights. And on Monday, Malta lifted all travel restrictions on passengers from China.
A 5th person has been arrested in connection with the murder of a model in Hong Kong. The dismembered body of Abby Choi was discovered in a village last Friday, 3 days after she was reported missing. The 4 people arrested earlier included Choi's ex-husband and other members of his family.
SpaceX has been forced to delay its mission to fly a 6-person crew to the International Space Station. The problem with the ignition fluid was detected just minutes before the rocket was due to blast off. The next launch attempt has been scheduled for Tuesday. The team plans to stay in space for a 6-month scientific mission.
Tens of thousands of people across California are without power after one of the strongest winter storms on record.
High winds have uprooted trees and knocked out power lines. Roads have been closed after snow blanketed the state. Our correspondent Chris Jones has the story.
For some in California, the intense snowfall has brought a rare opportunity for white winter walks and snowball fights, something many of the young people here have rarely, if ever, experienced in their hometown.
Well, I live where there's like no snow ever. Like the only snow I've got was hail in like 1st grade, and it's pretty exciting. We've been building snowmans and then breaking them.
For tens of thousands of others, though, it's been a nightmare. Unusually high levels of rain and snow has caused riverbanks to swell, flooding nearby residential areas and roads. This unprecedented winter storm has left more than 120,000 people across the state in cities like Los Angeles without power. The heavy snowfall has made roads perilous, and those in the state capital of Sacramento have been told to avoid travel until Wednesday, with snow still expected to fall until then. Most of California is listed as being in a drought. That's because the usually humid weather, combined with climate change and human overuse, has impacted one of its main water sources, the Colorado River. Some experts say this weather event is welcome, but hopes the precipitation becomes less severe.
The biggest pro is that we're getting above normal in our precipitation. So we have a huge deficit that's many years old. We need to still be above normal on precipitation. So that's the part that's really beneficial. I want to fill our reservoirs, start to impact our groundwater supply and improve that situation. The cons, obviously, we don't want everything to fall at once because that's where we have damage.
Reports show that temperatures are expected to remain low. In some parts, it's predicted to be 15 degrees below average. Chris Jones, CGTN, Washington.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Meats on the menu at the Paris Agricultural Show as French exporters pin all their hopes on China.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So into the attention of world leaders.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew. And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
As China embarks on a new journey of modernization, the National People's Congress, China's top legislature, and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the top political advisory body, convene their annual sessions in early March. Join us on CGTN for our special coverage of the two sessions. Find out the course China will take to ensure a sustainable future for its 1.4 billion people, how China's decisions will impact global economic recovery. Agenda for 1.4 billion on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. French farmers are hoping that China's reopening following coronavirus lockdowns will also unlock more export opportunities of pork and beef. It's one of the many talking points at this week's Paris Farming Show.
Yes, the Agricultural Expo is one of the most important events on the economic and political calendar in France. Our correspondent Catherine Drew is there for us now. Catherine, bonsoir.
Bonsoir, Paul. Apologies, we just had to jump out of the way of this live shot. That's why I know you couldn't see me, because the cows that had been on show in the corner were coming through. So there was a little bit of disruption and a bit of excitement. As you can see, this is a very, very popular show. Around about 600,000 people will come here, and you'll be able to see some of the animals behind me, I hope. Around 4,000 animals on display. display. This is, as you said, a really important event in the French agricultural calendar. It's also a family event. Lots and lots of children here, lots of interactive exhibits, really learning about where their food comes from. But it's not just entertainment. Of course, it is an important business event. France is a huge exporter of dairy and meat produce. And, of course, China is a huge importer. And there has been some discussion here about audits that Chinese officials have done of French pork producers and whether that could boost the industry. Now, we've been talking to some of those farmers to get their views. Let's take a look at what they said.
This week, the farm has come to the city. Hundreds of thousands of visitors are attending one of the world's biggest agricultural shows, the annual Salon de l'Agriculture in Paris. Amongst the 4,000 animals, the country's pig varieties. Pork and pork products are one of France's key exports, and China is a big market. According to the National Pork Association, France exported 130,000 tonnes to China in 2022, which was slightly down on previous years. But French officials are hoping that market could grow, with the publication of 2015 audits which would clear more French pork producers to enter Chinese markets.
Exporting to China is crucial for us. In France, we eat only some parts of the pig. There are good parts, but we can't get the French or Europeans to eat them. While the Chinese are efficient, they ask for ears, for example. When you put pig ears in a French restaurant, I think everyone will look at them, but nobody will eat them. In China, everybody is chasing the pig's ears. They love it. These are cultural differences, but we need them. They allow us to sell more pieces of the animal instead of throwing it away.
As the show opened, the country's president used a visit to announce a trip to China. Among weighty geopolitical issues, discussions of trade also likely.
The approval of French exporters is seen as key to this industry. It's been particularly pressing in recent years as Chinese herds have been hit by cases of African swine flu. However, pork is not the only meat on France's export menu.
China has a growing appetite for beef. The market boomed in 2022 and is expected to continue to rise until the end of the decade. The distance of European farmers from China puts them at a disadvantage. But French beef farmers do see a potential opportunity with breeds known for high-quality meat, such as Salers.
Yes, we had started to export to China before COVID. China was beginning to import meat from Salers cows. The president of the Label Rouge Food Quality Group even went to China to introduce the meat and negotiate the tariffs. If China responds, then why not? It's true that before COVID, China had tasted the Salers cow meat, and now they are fond of it and eat more and more.
Some hope the opening of new markets could reinvigorate France's meat sector, which, like others around the world, has been suffering several maladies, including the effects of high inflation, an ageing workforce, and lack of younger people coming into the industry to take up the reins.
So you heard in that report me speak about African swine flu, which of course has been a big concern not only in China but across the EU as well. Several countries have been impacted by that, and of course it can be devastating for the farmers involved. Obviously animal health has been a key subject in the news. We just had the news from Cambodia, the very sad death of an 11-year-old girl from bird flu, and monitoring these viruses, particularly with a view to human health and any potential impact, has been a key message from France's body ANSES, which here and it regulates animal welfare. We've been speaking to Charlotte Dunoyer. She's the scientific director of ANSES, and she has been really bringing home the message this week that animal health is human health. Let's listen to what she said.
The whole system of animal disease surveillance is essential, so we could develop systems of quick signs of detection, such as synchronous surveillance systems that monitor mortality over time. And when there is an increase in mortality, give the alert to be immediately under vigilance. We can also use analysis methods that allow us to detect the disease as close as possible to the animals on the farm. These tests will enable us to verify that there is disease even before the symptoms appear. This is one of the things we're working on. 75% of emerging infectious diseases in humans have an animal origin. So what is very important to prevent tomorrow's virus is to continue to monitor and do advanced research on animal diseases, because these animal diseases could possibly be transmitted to humans tomorrow. So it is very important to continue this research, especially on certain families of pathogens that can pass to humans, such as influenza viruses.
Well, we'll be here tomorrow to speak all things ag-tech, so join us then. Thanks.
Catherine, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed. Catherine Drew in Paris.
Well, it's time to plant crops on many farms in China. Spring crops contribute about 60% to China's annual grain output.
That's right. Farmers in southern parts of the country are busy on the paddy fields. With the help of greenhouses, breeding centres and mechanised ploughs, they can shorten growing time significantly.
Well, with spring ploughing gathering momentum across China, commercial bio-breeding has also been gaining impetus.
Yes, China's first policy statement of the year has reiterated the country's determination to advance commercial bio-breeding. That's a method based on genetic modification technology to produce high-quality plants.
Industry experts say the ongoing drive will power China's rural revitalisation, propel the industry's renovation and ensure food security. It'll also create new demand for the industry, boosting revenues and profits for agro-tech companies.
Spring ploughing is an age-old ritual for Chinese farmers, but now it's becoming easier thanks to cutting-edge gadgets. Our correspondent Bo Yukun reports.
Modern agricultural technologies and machines are now largely at work in China. The cutting-edge measures are facilitating farming activities as spring ploughing begins to unfold across rural landscape. Here at one of the smart agricultural industrial parks in Yibin, Sichuan province, the newly built 3,000 square meters seedling centers has been officially put into use. The seedling planting machines can control the temperature and apply fertilizers automatically based on real-time data such as weather and pesticide conditions in the field. Those technologies will shorten the whole seedling cycle in just 8 to 14 days.
Using automatic technologies for raising seedlings can reduce farmers' labor burdens. Our germination rate can reach more than 98%.
Despite the technologies that are used inside the greenhouse, modern agricultural machinery is also widely applied in the field. More and more autopilot tractors equipped with spatial navigation satellite system and manned transplanters, agricultural drones are playing their part in the planting. In order to make the best use of those giant machines, local governments are working to turn the fragmented land plot into large-scale production units.
The field is relatively flat now. It is more convenient for our mechanized operation. The utilization rate of machinery will be at least 30% higher this year than before.
Applying cutting-edge technologies in spring farming is just a glimpse of China's efforts to achieve its rural vitalization. The government has pledged earlier to strengthen agricultural infrastructure and consolidating support for agricultural technology in this year's #1 central document. Yu Bokun, CGTN.
And finally, the Northern Lights are usually most visible over places like Scandinavia.
But on Sunday night, here in the UK and Ireland, the sky was lit up with pink, purple and green hues as far south as Cornwall in England. The light spectacle occurs when charged particles collide with gases in the Earth's upper atmosphere. More displays are expected in the coming nights.
The headlines again. A deal is done. The EU and the UK have reached agreement on post-Brexit trade arrangements for Northern Ireland.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye. Bye-bye.